I don't know who needs to hear this today, but God's presence is a reality, even though we may not always sense that or feel that. Unfortunately, the reason that we don't always sense it or feel it is because of the busyness of our lives. We have so many irons in the fire, so many things going on, or we have so much noise in our lives, so many things that are vying for our attention that we are unable to slow down. We are unable to crowd out the noise so that we can be still and be aware of God's presence in our lives. Things like social media, work responsibilities, anxiety related to family matters or work matters or whatever the case might be, crowds out that sense of God's presence. The hymn inspiration for today's devotional was written by Henry Light in 1847, just a couple of weeks before he passed away. Interestingly, he never intended this hymn to be a hymn. It was a poem. More on that in a few minutes. But Henry Light was born in Scotland in 1793. He was educated at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, and was a lifetime member of the Church of England. Throughout his life, he struggled with poor health, but reports claim that he was very strong in faith, very strong in spirit. He was a poet, a musician, and a minister who coined the phrase, "It is better to wear out than to rust out." The last 20 years of his life he spent as the minister of a church in a poor fishing community in Lower Brixham, Devonshire, England. And he preached his last sermon on September the 4th, 1847. History tells us that he virtually had to crawl to the pulpit because of his failing health. Nonetheless, he told the congregation that he strongly desired to deliver this final lesson because, and I'm quoting, "to induce you to prepare for the solemn hour which must come to all by a timely appreciation and dependence on the death of Christ." After preaching this final sermon, he embarked for the warmer climate of Rome, Italy, at the advice of his doctors, stating that his health required warmer weather. Unfortunately, during his trek, death found him, and he was interred in an English cemetery in Nice, France. So what was this poem? This near-deathbed poem that Light wrote that has become a beloved hymn of the church. Take a listen, and I'll be back.
Abide with me, fast all sleep and tide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comfort skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's faint shadows flee. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me.
I said earlier in the devotional that this was a poem. It was never intended to be a hymn. The reason we know this is because the poem was first published in 1850 in a book titled Light's Remains, and this poem had the notation that it was to be read, not sung. The poem made its way to the United States of America, and in 1855 was published in Henry Ward Beecher's Plymouth collection, again with the notation that it was to be read and not sung. William Henry Monk came upon the poem, and the poem so moved him that he wrote a tune to go along with the words of that poem. It is a very well-known tune titled Eventide. It's hard to tell whether the words or the tune are the more awe-inspiring of this hymn. Certainly the two work together in order to create this beloved hymn. And so after Monk set the words to music, it was first published as a hymn in 1861. And since that time has become a song of encouragement, a song creating a real sense of peace for Christians who are in distress or who are in sorrow. Interestingly, Light's inspiration for the poem was a scene in Luke chapter 24. Jesus has risen from the dead. He has appeared to several people, and he now appears to two disciples on the road to Emmaus. And they walk along and they talk, and at the end of this, the two disciples say, "Abide with us, for it is toward the evening, and the day is far spent." God's abiding presence is a reality in your life and mine. The fact that the busyness of our lives, the fact that the noise of our lives sometimes hinders us from being able to feel that presence, from being able to hear the still, small voice, doesn't change the reality of God's abiding presence. And so, let us not allow that busyness, let us not allow the noise of our lives to hinder our ability to be acutely aware of God's abiding presence. I've got nothing but big love for you. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.